Did you lose friends in that season? A lot of people drop you.
Oh man, I lost tons of friends. I lost, most of them were ministry friendships, which,
Exactly.
that's a whole different podcast episode in and of itself. But, people who don't know you per se, people that know your gift. And
Mm.
yeah, and so
Oh, man. Oh, man, Tim. Yeah. They don't know you. They know your gift.
they know your gift.
Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast. I'm so glad you joined us. Today, we're going to talk with Tim Timberlake about what happens when succession doesn't go well. What do you do when you're leading and bleeding? How do you find momentum? Plus, Tim opens up about his divorce that he went through in ministry in his 20s. It's going to be a fascinating conversation. So wherever you're watching, be sure to subscribe, follow, leave a comment to join the conversation. And now a word from today's partners. Then we'll dive right into my conversation with Tim Timberlake. This episode is brought to you by the Church Leaders Conference. Hey, church leaders, maybe you're feeling weary or burned out or just ready for what's next in ministry. Well, this spring, Watermark Community Church in Dallas, Texas is hosting the Church Leaders Conference. Because this event consistently fills up, they're offering 2-date options so every church leader in their team can be part of it. Choose Monday and Tuesday, April 27th and 28th, or Wednesday and Thursday, April 29th and 30th, 2026. Exact same conference, 2 opportunities. And over 2 days, you'll experience main stage sessions with biblical teaching, practical breakouts to strengthen key areas of ministry, and you'll have time to have fun with your team. So whether you're a pastor, a staff member, or a volunteer, you'll walk away refreshed in your calling and equipped with tools to take back to your church. So bring a team of 6 or more, and you'll save with a group discount. But don't wait. The price increases in just 2 weeks. So gather your team, choose your dates, and register today at clc2026.com. That's clc2026.com. Tim, great to have you on the show finally and to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an honor, Carey. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. So I want to go way back and you talk about this. Your grandfather was a sharecropper.
Yeah.
And you might have to give an education to our audience on what that is, but he went from living in literally a one-room tin shack to starting churches and literally changing his family's trajectory for generations. Talk a little bit about your origins, the transformation of your family tree, et cetera. And let's start with, what is sharecropping?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So sharecropping, for our audience that does not know or is not familiar, is kind of one step above a slave. And so after they abolished slavery, to keep workmen and workwomen around, they categorized them as sharecroppers. And for the most part, sharecropping was a lot less abusive. You still had some abuse involved. You still had very cheap labor. And what they would do to offset the labor and the work of the sharecroppers is allow sharecroppers to stay on the property in what they would call living quarters for free. And so all of the sharecroppers would raise their kids and raise those that were pretty close to the family that didn't have any family anymore because of a variety of circumstances in this sharecropper's house. And historically speaking, sharecropper homes were a one-room, tin roof house. And in the middle of that tin roof, one-room house, there was a potbelly stove that kind of kept them warm, and they would utilize that for primarily everything that they needed fire for. So whether it was heat, whether it was cooking, whether it was to warm up bath water, that was the primary source of heat in the house. And so my grandfather, he raised his 8 children with my grandmother in that sharecropper's house. My father was the oldest of 8. And so he stayed there for quite a while. And as my grandfather was a sharecropper, he got called into ministry in kind of a very odd way. My grandmother was very sick, and they had to rush her to the hospital, and found out that she had some type of infection in her lungs. And so they had to remove one entire lung, and they cut her remaining lung in half. And so she lived on a ventilator and life support for the next 2 days with half a lung. And as doctors were going to take her off of life support, my grandfather asked them if they would give him a moment to go pray. And so he went to the lobby of this hospital and he dropped down on his knees and he prayed to God that he would spare his wife. And if God would spare his wife, then he and everyone that would come through his lineage would serve God. And he got up, Carey, and went back into that hospital room, sat beside my grandmother, and they pulled her off of life support. And she lived that night, and she lived the next night, and she lived the night after that. And finally, she was able to breathe on her own, and they ended up getting her out of the hospital. And she lived until she was about 91 years old. And she was a tough cookie, man. I mean, just tough, resilient, tough as nails. But my
No kidding.
grandfather made God a promise. And the promise was that if God would spare his life, he and everyone that would come through his lineage would serve God. And so, as my grandmother got out of the hospital, my grandfather started sharing the word of God with people that he worked alongside of, the sharecroppers and other people who worked the land that he was working. And eventually, that number got so big, they started a church together.
Hmm.
And so back then, church was a little bit different. They used to have services, particularly for primarily African Americans in the South.
Sure.
They didn't have a lot of money, and so they couldn't go to church every Sunday. And so church was every other Sunday. So he started a church. They met every first and third Sunday. And because he just felt a call and a demand for the word of God, he started his second church, which met on second and fourth Sundays. And so the two churches were about 20 miles from each other. And so on first and third Sunday, he would preach at one, second and fourth Sunday, he would preach at the other. And both of these churches began to grow as he began to teach the word of God, and people started to get transformed and really started to break generational curses and generational chains off of their lives. And so my dad grew up going to those churches and eventually playing the organ for my grandfather. And he felt a call of God on his life, he and my mom, and they ended up taking over a small Baptist church in the same little city that my grandfather was in called Creedmoor. And at the time, the Baptist church had about 34 members. What ended up happening, they got a hold of some of the teachings from Dr. Oral Roberts in the late 60s, early 70s,
Hmm.
and started to hear about the transformative power of the Holy Spirit. And so they started to teach on the power of the Holy Spirit, and the church began to shrink from 34 people. And the only people that were left was about 9 praying mothers. And they just began to pray that God would send revival to Creedmoor. And sure enough, God began to change that city, and it grew from 9 praying mothers to about 150 people over the course of the next 6 months. And then that next following year, the church jumped to about 500 people. And it continued to grow exponentially from 500 people to 1,000. And so they outgrew the small Baptist church that they were in
Hmm.
and started to develop about literally half a mile down the same street that the church was on, what they would call the Life Center. And this Life Center would serve a couple of purposes in the community. One, it would be a larger auditorium to fit the people. Two, it would be a gymnasium when it is not being used for church to kind of serve the youth in the community because there was nothing in Creedmoor for youth to do at that time. And they ended up going into this life center, and the church continued to grow. So it jumped from 1,000 to 2,000, and then from 2,000 to about 4,000.
Wow.
And we were having in that particular life center 5 services a Sunday. And they went on global television on a number of different Christian television networks, TVN, INSP back in the day, the Golden Eagle Network. And God just continued to grow the church, and people would drive from all over the East Coast to come to Sunday services and to hear about godly marriage, to hear how to steward finances, to hear about how to steward families well, which in the 70s and 80s wasn't something that a lot of churches was teaching at the time. And it it just began to kind of snowball, and the church in a town of 1,400 people grew to about 12,000 people.
Where's Creedmoor?
Creedmoor is right outside of Raleigh, Durham area. So it was considered to be the outskirts, but we call it the countryside.
The countryside, yeah. So you're in the South.
Yeah, we are deep in the South. And growing up, we had one stop sign in Creedmoor, and
Wow.
we got a stoplight, and that was like, man, we're turning into
That's
a
big news.
metropolitan city. It was huge news.
Tim, I wanted to start there because my first degree is history, political science, and I studied sharecropping.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to think, oh, that's a 19th century thing.
Yeah.
You know, we're well removed from it. We're so much more enlightened. But the fact that that was your grandfather
Yeah.
and your father was shaped by it. You know, the older I get, my parents are circa World War II.
Mhm.
They were born into the war. My grandparents were early 20th century. But I think about how their experiences in Europe during the war probably had an impact on me, even though I was born in North America, you know, in the 60s. That stuff lives
Absolutely.
generationally. How has that shaped you? Because it is very tempting to think, oh, that's like ancient history. That's Abraham Lincoln, right? Like,
Mhm.
but no, we're sitting here talking today as two people very much alive in the, you know, first quarter of the 21st century. And this is in your consciousness and memory.
Absolutely. Yeah, it shaped a lot about my upbringing. And so my grandfather and I were very close. And my father ended up passing when he was 52, the day after my 18th birthday. And so after he transitioned and went home to be with the Lord, my grandfather was like my second father. And so the stories that he would share, just even geographically, the area that we stayed in, one of the larger KKK headquarters was about 2 miles from our church, and so we were around
Ooh.
this quite a bit growing up. And the South in the 80s and 90s, it wasn't too far removed from intense and severe racism. As a matter of fact, my younger brother, his high school still had segregated proms up until he graduated. And so
Wow.
it was still
And that
there.
was what,
Yeah.
in the 90s,
No,
2000s?
no, this is 2016. Yeah.
Like
So
yesterday?
yeah, so
Yesterday.
it's very, very recent. And so there's still,
Whoa.
and so
Pardon
we
me.
we still drive down the street there. You still see a lot of racist rhetoric. You still see a lot of Confederate flags. You still see a lot of that in that particular area. And so it's one of those things where uh, it gives us an opportunity to really share the gospel and the love of Jesus Christ in the face of that kind of tension. And for our church, we opened a school that kind of ran alongside of our church. And so our church and our school served a lot of the community. And in that community, we had an opportunity to serve the grandchildren of some of the KKK leaders. And that to me was a very beautiful thing. There's nothing that demonstrates the love of Jesus Christ more than knowing someone hates you, but being able to feed them food and being able to give their grandkids a Christian education so that they know what the love of Christ really looks like. And so it wasn't something that was far off and distant for me, something that was very present in our community, and something that shaped who I am today, hearing the stories of my grandfather, hearing the stories of my mom and my dad, who, growing up, when they heard a car, they knew to run and hide because it was probably driven by someone who wanted to do harm to them. And so, understanding that and understanding that although things have changed drastically, there's still a lot of that tension in the South and in the areas that we grew up in.
You're doing ministry in Jacksonville right now, which I think by most accounts, there's sort of a line that goes through Florida. A lot of people would say North Florida is still the South. Would you agree with that? Disagree with that?
I do. We consider North Florida to be South Georgia, and so
Right, right.
there's quite a bit of different pockets in the North Florida area. And there's some of that tension there, but not as prominent and prevalent as it is kind of in the sticks of North Carolina.
Yeah. How does that, all of what we just talked about, shape your thinking even today? Like what's the part of that nobody sitting in my shoes or most of our listeners would really understand?
Yeah, I mean, raising a young boy who is 8 years old, me and my wife, and understanding some of the challenges, some of the difficulties he will face growing up in a world and in a region that, quite frankly, won't like him because of the way that he looks. It gives both me and my wife, who, by the way, is Canadian, opportunity to, steward him where he sees the love of Christ and knows how to demonstrate that even against opposition. And so
Mm.
it's something that I think about often, but also from the perspective, I don't want him to grow up afraid. I don't want him to grow up fearful. I don't want him to grow up with this skewed perspective that everyone is against him, because that's not the case. But to make him aware that there will be people that he comes across that will treat him differently because of how he looks. And so it's one of those things that I can't get away from. I can't get out of my skin and I can't get out of the way that I look. But what I can do is control my reactions and my response. And so I may not be able to control what other people say or do or how they treat me, but I can control how I respond and react. And so for us, just making sure that we raise a young boy that knows how to respond and react in the face of adversity.
How's that playing out in your church at Celebration Church? You know, you lead a very large church. We'll get into some of the story
Yeah.
behind Celebration in a little bit. But when you think about the kind of community you're trying to create, how, and this is a note for all of us, how do we do a better job of, because you're right, if anybody has a shot at changing the reality of racial hatred and division, it's the church. Like, if it isn't the church, I don't know what is, because everything else seems to have failed,
Yeah.
right? So how does that impact how you're trying to shape the church that you're responsible for leading?
Yeah. I think for us, what we are trying to steward is a church that is a reflection of heaven. And a lot of times leaders think, okay, if it's a predominantly Black church, if I throw somebody white on stage, it will attract white people. Or if it's a predominantly white church, if I throw somebody Black on stage, it will attract Black people. And that's simply not the case. I think our dinner tables should reflect the church that we desire to see. I think that our relationships should reflect the type of churches that we desire to see. And so, if we're not engaging in cultural differences in our homes and in our relationships, then we can't anticipate and expect to see diversity, not just in ethnicity, but also in age in our churches. And so that's been one of the things that we have really leaned into over the last 3 or 4 years, being very intentional with our personal relationships, me and my wife, Jen, to be a reflection of the church that we want to steward. And I'm honored that our church is as diverse as it is in both ethnicities and generations. So we serve 4 generations of people, and we have a spectrum of all ethnicities and backgrounds reflected in our church. One of the most diverse churches I've ever seen, and God has allowed us and awarded us the opportunity to steward it. So it's pretty humbling.
Why doesn't just putting, if I'm a white lead pastor, why does hiring a Black communicator or, an Asian or brown communicator, why does that not change the reality for people?
I think it doesn't change people's reality most of the time. It now that can work depending on where the church is located, but it may not be sustainable for long periods of time. But the majority of the time, it doesn't work because there's still no genuine relationship between that person and whoever is the lead steward or leader of that church. And so if the leader does not engage in meaningful, heartfelt conversations to figure out, okay, What is it that this person has that I don't have that they can offer to a community of people that we desire to be here? If those conversations aren't being had, then it's temporary. And so for a leader, I can only take people to the last place that I've been. And what I mean by that is Moses could not take the children of Israel into the promised land because he did not go there. He took them to the
Mhm.
desert because it was the last place that he had been. And so, if my table does not look like the congregation, the community, or the church that I want to see, then I will end up taking people back to the last place that I've been. And so, I believe that it may be short lived for people to put figureheads or, just people of different ethnicities on stage, platform them. But if those people don't have the heart of that church, it may end up doing more damage than it does good. And that's what I've seen a lot of times. Someone is plugged into a position because of how they look and not necessarily the purpose that God has given them for that community.
When you're creating a church that really reflects the community, it means you've got, a variety of situations. You've got single people, you've got second marriages, third marriages, recent divorces. You've got all kinds of different people from all kinds of different walks. You've been pretty transparent about your life, and your first marriage didn't work out the way you hoped it would. Can you tell us that story and what you learned from it as someone who feels a call to ministry?
Absolutely. Yeah. So when I was 20 years old, um, I stepped into my first marriage as a pastor. And very young and very on fire for Jesus Christ. And, I made the mistake of marrying someone for me and not necessarily marrying someone for my purpose. And
Mm.
what ended up happening was when I got running in my purpose, I was a pretty young lead pastor, 20 years old, leading a church that was a good size. And when I got good into stride into leading that church, my ex-wife at the time had no desire to be in ministry, a part of ministry, even to follow Jesus at that particular time. And so it left me in a situation now where I'm leading and stewarding this church. I am um, having to do so from this position of, man, I am bleeding and I am gutted and I am wounded. But at the same time, understanding that there's people coming every Sunday that are kind of in the same predicament that I am in. And so I ended up getting a divorce not long after 25. And from that particular point forward, my mentality was I would rather be single than settle. And I want to help as many people as possible to know Jesus and to know that he's a healer, while at the same time understanding that I needed to be healed, understanding that my heart needed to be healed, my emotions needed to be healed. And so I went on this journey, Carrie, for the next few years of therapy and discovering who Christ wanted me to be. And, in doing so, I started to discover there were a lot of people in church and in my community that had walked through divorce.
Mhm.
And they came out on the other end pretty fine after a season. And, life looked differently. And there were certain aspects of life that looked much better. And after a while, when I started to see, man, I'm still here and God has a plan for me that is still significant. I started to really turn the page in my life and ask God the question, okay, what do you want from me? And I'll be honest with you, when I was asking God that question, marriage wasn't, something I had on my radar. And in 2014, I went to New York and I went there with one of my closest friends, and I was there for my publicist at the time because I had a book coming out. And a friend of mine who I had just met via social media invited me to a conference that they were hosting. And the night before, they had this kind of get together for all of the mutual friends that he had invited. And I saw this Canadian girl kind of across the way, and he introduced us, and she started to talk to me about what I did because of the title at my book at the time. And I told her I was a pastor. And kind of in her disbelief and shock, she was like, "There's no way this guy's a pastor. He can't be a pastor. He looks too
What was your book
attractive."
called? Which book was that?
It was called Abandon at the time. It is laying aside your plans for God's purpose. And it was one of the nights. There's those moments in our life, I truly believe this, that mark us, change us, and we never forget them. It was
Yeah.
so unexpected, so kind of out of the blue. But I remember the conversation like it was yesterday. And we met. We had a short exchange, and we didn't see each other except for at this conference. And it was probably 1,500 people there. And I looked across the aisle to my left, and she was sitting one complete section over, and she was with her identical twin sister. But they didn't look identical because her identical twin sister at the time had bleach blonde hair. So I knew the difference between
You
them.
know who was who.
I knew who was who. And and so I was just magnetically attracted to her. And I didn't push it, didn't ask her for her number or anything like that. And we left the conference without exchanging any contact information. But all of us were on this group text together. It was about 22 of us. And what ended up happening was 2 months later, uh, someone in the group text sent out a message asking, were we coming back to another conference that was being held in New York? And would you know it, her and her sister were going to be coming to that conference. Now, the odds
Mm.
of this was pretty slim because at the time she was staying in the Bay Area of California, and her sister was back in Vancouver. And so this great migration happened where this group got back together. And as we got back together, man, it was just something special about her. I knew, that not only was it a magnetic draw towards her, but this is someone that I desired to spend the rest of my life with. And so I didn't push it, didn't try to, work my plan and lay down some incredible, bars of pleasantries, Carrie. Didn't try to do any of that. And we left New York, and she ended up texting me and asking, could she call me? And I told her yes. And unbeknownst to me, she was going through one of the most difficult seasons of her life. And she had tried to get in contact with a few other people, and no one was either picking up or responding. And it was the first time she heard the audible voice of God tell her to text me. And so the first time
Wow.
she hears from God, it's about me. And
It's
that's
about
how I
you.
know.
Well, that's a pretty good
I'm
deal,
telling
Tim.
you,
Like, not
man.
many people get that.
Man,
I did not get that.
that
No.
that is how I knew I am a true servant of the Most High God. If He would audibly speak to her about me, I must not be doing bad at all. And so
Mm.
He speaks to her. She texts me instead of calling. So there's, some subtle disobedience there on her part, but nonetheless, she was partially obedient. I happened to be up at that particular time because she was on the West Coast. It was pretty late West Coast time, which means it was even later East Coast time. I'm a night owl. And that night I just happened to be up praying. And I mean, it was one of those things that only God could align. And we ended up talking for 3 hours. She called me crying. She gets off the phone laughing. And I told her when we were getting off the phone, I want to FaceTime you tomorrow to make sure that you're okay. It's hard for me to see that you are okay if I can't see you. And we ended up FaceTiming every single day up until we got married. And outside of Jesus Christ, the best decision I have made in my life. Yeah.
That's incredible. I mean, it's great to see that. I want to go back because this is a leadership podcast.
Yeah.
You're not the only leader who's been through a season where you're bleeding. How do you lead when you're bleeding? Because that sounded like that might have been a 5-6 year window.
Yes. It was a long time.
Yeah. So there's
Yeah.
some people right now who are bleeding, and maybe it's not their marriage. Maybe it is their marriage. Maybe it's whatever. I mean, conventional wisdom would be step aside, heal, whatever. What did you learn about leading while you're bleeding in that season?
Yeah. And so I learned a lot about the power of Jesus in that season. And I learned a lot about how much he cares for us, but specifically how much he cared for me, because he would give me the strength to continue to lead as I was bleeding, as I was going through the various difficulties, the various pains, when I helped other people to stop bleeding in the various situations and circumstances that they were trying to navigate. And to be honest with you, for all of our leaders that are leaning into this moment, there are very few seasons that we're not bleeding. You
Yeah, you're
know,
bleeding about something.
I'm telling you. And so the thing that I had to be very careful of doing, though, I had to be very careful not to teach and preach from a wound. I had to teach and preach from a scar. And so, in those seasons where we are bleeding, in those seasons where we are in pain, not to utilize those opportunities to bring other people into the wound, but to allow God to heal that area, allow Him to provide healing balm for that area, and then teach from a scar. And so that's what I tried to do in that season, and allow God to work in me and work out of me everything that was not a reflection of Him. But I discovered His tender mercy, His care, His love for me in that season. And, when you're going through moments and you're going through seasons like that, you often feel alone. Leadership, in and of itself, is a very lonely journey. But then, based upon the compounding pain, you start to look around and ask yourself the question: is there anyone else leading that's navigating pain like this? And that's when it gets even lonelier. And so I had to throw myself into community. I had to keep myself surrounded with godly men and women who had navigated similar pains and similar heartbreak and similar heartaches to just infuse me with hope on a daily and weekly basis and let me know, hey, God did this for me, and He surely would do the same for you. And so I would encourage those leaders that are listening and watching right now that may be hemorrhaging and may be bleeding, get to a place that can pour back into you as you pour out into God's people while you're navigating this season. And it's okay to take time for yourself. It is okay to go get healthy. It is okay to go through a process of both grieving what was lost and healing what God desires to renew and to restore. And so, as leaders, we don't do that enough. We try to push through it. We try to lead through it. We don't take time for ourselves. And one of the greatest weapons the enemy uses is to keep us busy instead of taking time to allow God to heal what needs to be healed. And so, I would encourage our leaders that are listening with that. If you need to take time, take it. If you need to take a season where you are absolutely doing nothing but stewarding your soul well and stewarding the process of restoration and health well, then do that. And there will be great benefits and great seasons ahead because of it.
When you look back on that 5 or 6 year window, or feel free to expand it up to today, what has been, and maybe you hinted at this, the loneliness, but maybe it's not. What was the hardest dynamic to navigate in that season? What was the thing that almost took you under, if there was a thing?
At multiple, I think one of the things that almost took me under mentally and was just burdensome for my soul, not just in that season, but in other seasons before and after, was um, the loneliness of people pushing you away simply because they did not understand the context of the decisions that I was making. And so sometimes you are lonely because people have pushed you away. And sometimes you're lonely because there are just people that just don't understand the journey that you may be on. And so you can be around people and still feel alone. And one of the
Yeah.
things that I was asking God the question, even in a room full of people, is okay, God, I have these people, but who has me? and who is walking with me, who is on this journey with me, who is navigating this with me. And it was at that particular time, very few people. I had family and I had a
Mhm.
small group of community relationships and friendships. But I just felt like, man, I need something different or I need something more that I just wasn't finding. And sometimes it's seasonal. Sometimes God has you in a position and in a place where you are intentionally by yourself so that you can hear who He is making you into being. And for some of us, that's exactly where He wants us. And then for others of us, He has to position us there for a short season to refill us so that we can go out and continue to pour into other people.
Did you lose friends in that season? A lot of people drop you.
Oh man, I lost tons of friends. I lost, most of them were ministry friendships, which,
Exactly.
that's a whole different podcast episode in and of itself. But, people who don't know you per se, people
Mhm.
that know your gift. And
Mm.
yeah, and so
Oh man. Oh man, Tim. Yeah. They don't know you. They know your
they
gift.
know your gift. And when they think that you no longer need them for your gift setting, then they put distance between you and them. And so what I had to find out the hard way is oftentimes people only want you around when you have a need for them. And when that need is no longer of value in their perspective, they put distance between you and them. And so I found out very quickly who respected my gift in that season and who respected me as a person. And so there's something valuable, and this is for those that are leaning into this moment with us. There's something valuable about discovering the difference between you and your gift.
Hmm.
And when you discover that you are not what you do, and in that season, I got a revelation of that. I got an understanding of that. I'm not what I do. And I value what I do. I honor God for the gift that He's given me of what He is asking me to carry out. But who I am is not what I do. Who I am, at the very pinnacle of who I am a son of God first. I'm a
Yeah.
son of God first. That is who I am. The second thing I am, I'm a godly husband to my wife. The third thing I am, I'm a great father to our son. And then everything after that is viewed from the perspective of sonship. It's viewed from the perspective of leadership in my home. And that gives me the opportunity to operate in the purpose and the gift that God has placed before me of leading other people. And so if I'm not leading myself to the feet of Jesus to know myself as a son of God first, then I will always look for my identity in the things that God has allowed me to place my hands on. And that's fleeting. And so the relationships that were in my life at that time, based upon what I did and how well I did it, all of those relationships were gone. Yeah.
So you learned that lesson in your 20s.
Yes.
I think that there are a lot of people. I am learning that lesson.
Mhm.
I am not what I do, but it's very tempting,
Yes.
particularly if you do something that you really love and it's gone well. It's very hard to separate who you are from what you do. It's almost like and add ministry into the mix. You got a wholly toxic cocktail in the
Absolutely.
midst of that
Yep.
because it's so confusing. I want you to play a game of extrapolation. So I want you to imagine that you hadn't learned that lesson at 25, 28, whenever it really began to sink its teeth into you. Fast forward to where you are now. Who might you have become? What might have happened to you if you didn't learn that lesson between who you are and what you do in your 20s?
I think I would have become a person that was driven by outward success, would have buried myself in ministry because that's where my identity would have been rooted. I think that I would have become a person that was a people pleaser because to a person that is really lost, having other people affirm who they think you are is pleasing. I think I would have become a person that believed that comfort and convenience was covering. when in fact it is not. And so I think that could have been who I had become as a leader, that God has allowed to serve other people. And I'm so glad that that was not the end result. And I'm so glad in a very beautiful way that I encountered, I stewarded, and went through the pain early in leadership that I went through, because it prepared me for other pain points on this leadership journey.
What have some other pain points been for you since then?
On record today, I was probably a part of, along with my wife, one of the worst church transitions in church history.
Well, I wanted to go there, so let's go there. Yeah, let's talk about that. We're an open book.
For
We're
sure.
taking notes.
And so, I mean, just historically speaking, and you know this because you are a historian, I have not seen a transition go this horribly bad before. In modern history, I'm sure there are other scenarios and cases of worse than what we have had to navigate and steward. But when you think of drama, when you think of all of the things that could have gone wrong, they happen and unfolded in
I
our
did a bit of
transition.
research getting ready for this interview on it because I missed it when the news cycle was fresh. I live in a bubble, I guess, but my goodness. Do you want to give us, for those who may not be familiar with the situation, without, this isn't a place I like throwing people under the bus, but I like naming the issues, and you know the difference, right?
100%.
So with what happened, because it is crazy.
Yeah. Harry, I still kind of scratch my head and ask myself that question. But
what happened?
I think, I think that a part of what happened was the loss of identity for the founders of the church.
So they had led the church for how many years? It was decades, right?
Yeah, it had to have been at the time 18, 19 years. I think that they hit a wall and could not get past that, and hit a level of leadership burnout that they were not expecting and anticipating, and felt like they just could not take the church forward. And so they prayed about who God would desire to take the church forward. They both heard from God that it was both me and my wife. They reached out to us and asked us, would we consider transitioning the church? And originally we said no, we had no desire to do that. We were fulfilling the call of God at that time in North Carolina at the church that my parents started.
Right. And were you the same stream, like same, not denomination, it's non-denominational, but were you in like similar, circles at that time?
Yes and no. And so we had some mutual friends and acquaintances, but hadn't spent a lot of time together. We had been probably aware of each other at that particular time for about a year.
Okay. But you got invited into it. This wasn't, hey, the elders called, here's a mop, here's a bucket, clean it up. This was supposed to be a seamless succession.
Absolutely. And unbeknownst to us, no one else knew about this succession plan on their leadership team or their board.
Oh, so the board didn't know, leaders didn't know, church didn't know.
Yeah, so we were told this, had been prayed through and kind of bounced around this leadership team. And what ended up happening, we got invited to come and speak there. And so while we were there, just kind of doing a little observation, and the people that were hosting us were pretty close to us. And so we're just kind of asking them, how are you guys feeling? How are you guys processing? And they're completely unaware. They're like, we don't know what in the world you're talking about. So I was like, okay, that's a pretty big red flag, but not big enough in my spirit to the point where we were going to say no. And so what we committed to doing was praying through it over the next year. And we prayed through it for 6 months, didn't hear anything, didn't sense anything, didn't feel anything from God. And it wasn't until about the 9-month mark that both me and my wife, had this uncommon peace. And I remember I was upstairs, she was downstairs, and I kind of came downstairs. And my wife's name is Jennifer. I call her Jen. I said, I have this uncommon peace about Jacksonville. And she said, you know what? I was praying. I have the same peace. And our prayer was that God would give us an undeniable sign that this is what he wanted us to do. And, at that particular time, I had walked with God long enough that if he gave us that level of uncommon peace, then he would give us direction and clarity to follow.
Mhm.
And sure enough, God just started giving us undeniable signs and undeniable things that we knew were kind of God winks that this is what he wanted us to do. And so we moved down to Jacksonville. I joined the staff in 2020. Both me and my wife were leading the Jacksonville location, and then
Mhm.
COVID happened. And so everything kind of gets shut down in the States for a period of time. We were in Florida, and so Florida is like a different country in the US.
Yeah, it is.
It is just a different beast. And so we weren't shut down that long, but by the time we started gathering again, the only communicator at the time that people had seen was me.
Hmm.
And so, it was just a completely different church. The landscape of church was just completely different for all pastors and leaders that navigated and had to steward
Yeah, it
COVID.
was.
And so you throw
So
on
you'd
top
been
of
the
that,
exclusive communicator during the
yeah,
shutdown? Okay.
absolutely. And so, you throw that on top of transition, it is just a completely different.
And was the transition happening then when you moved down, or how?
It was supposed to happen, but
Oh, so it hadn't happened yet.
there
It
was
was
no
supposed to.
transition. So they didn't see the former founders until 2 years later, and that was once before the official transition service, which was in September of 2022.
So 2 years radio
Yeah,
silence from the founders, no public presence. You're kind of just, as they'd say in law, de facto,
yeah,
without the title, without the whatever, without the announcement. You're just functioning as lead pastor
yeah.
for 2 years.
2 years. The transition
Okay.
service, the transition
All
service
right. Let's
happens.
pick up the story now.
Yeah.
Stay tuned next week. Yeah.
So that
Okay.
happens. Transition service happens. They set
So
us
it's the end
in.
of 2022, the transition
End of
service.
2022. They set us in as senior pastors with the board, leaders of the church, a very public service. As a matter of fact, still on YouTube today.
Wow.
Uh, and then that December, I'm not sure kind of what happened, but something happened where they decided. They never said that they were transitioning out of leadership. They never said that they were stepping away from the church.
Despite the fact that the service had happened, still on YouTube, public
Still,
declaration.
I'm telling you, it very public transition service, very public statements, very public
Yeah.
decisions. And so it got to a point where they started to try to remove board members from the board so that they could regain control of the church again. And so the board at that particular time opened up an investigation and found out that there had been money misappropriated by them for quite a period of time.
By the founders or by the incumbents. Yeah.
And so after that happened, then they decided to sue the church for defamation, for releasing that information that we had to inform the church of. We are new pastors. This is a board that carries themselves with integrity, godly character. And so me and my wife just kind of stepped out of that, let the board handle that so that it wouldn't become an us versus them type of situation and scenario. And man, they just began to just put the metal to everything that they could to try to tear that church apart. And, by the grace of God, on the heels of COVID, people started to see the difference of what they were
Mm.
saying and what they were
Mm.
seeing. And our instructions from God was just continue to teach the word of God, let the board steward the church well, stay out of all of the nitty gritty legal things so that we could focus on loving the people. And every single day for an entire year, it was the number one news cycle in North Florida. And so, for context, it had been the first time the Jacksonville Jaguars had made the playoffs since 2017, 2018 season. And it had, more engagement, more news cycles than that. It was one of those things where we just had to turn the news off, focus on what God desired to do, focus on the people that we were stewarding, the people that we were leading, and try to do so with the heart pure and hands clean. And God continued to send people, and God continued to allow us to serve his people well. And a bunch of people left, and a bunch of new people came. And now we're in a season where a bunch of the people that left the church just because they didn't know what was truth, what was a lie, are coming back. And the church
That's the
is,
way it always goes, man.
yeah, the church is
Yeah.
healthy. It's thriving. We are growing at an extremely fast and healthy pace, which is a very beautiful thing to see. Because our prayer through it all was, God, please don't allow people to get lost in the cracks through a he say, she say kind of scenario, but allow your truth to prevail. So, not even my truth, not their truth, allow your truth to prevail. Allow your word to be the final say. And whatever you decide, that's what we'll follow. And we've just seen God be faithful and restore dignity to his bride.
I have 1,000 questions, Tim. Thank you for sharing that the way you
Yes.
did. Were you tempted to get in the fray to say, this is not true? Like how did you know, where was the line between keeping your head down and just preaching next Sunday or getting involved in the melee for you? Where was that line?
Yeah, I think because me and my wife, we've encountered a lot of pain over the course of life. And so for me, a lot of the pain that I encountered, a lot of the dumb decisions that I have made were prior to coming to Christ, being in the streets and being a very angry young man growing up and being very angry with God and being a teen that wanted to do everything he could to make God angry with him. And so, having lived in those seasons and having outlived the things that tried to kill me, church politics and church riffraff really didn't move us. And so I never was tempted to kind of go back and forth and say, no, this is actually what the truth is. The thing that God instructed us to do is just keep your head down, focus on the people, love the people, continue to teach my word. And that was our focus. And that's what we did. And, as I mentioned before, people begin to see very quickly between the truth and the lie.
You didn't have to say it.
Didn't have to say it, didn't have to preach about it, didn't have to teach a series on it, just continued to do what God had asked of us to do. And we started to see our staff get really, really healthy. And most people don't know this. I'll share this here on this podcast. All but two people on our staff right now are new hires. Everyone
Wow.
else had
Yeah.
been there, um, at least 10 years.
Not a surprise.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's just in the
Actually, the
majority.
surprise is that two people are still there from the previous era. That usually is a wholesale turnover.
So, I mean, the 98% of our staff has been there 10 years or more. And so to see them get healthy and to see them
Oh,
Um,
sorry, I got it backwards. Most of your staff are
yeah,
long-term staff.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. I
No.
misheard it. I must
Yeah.
have oral dyslexia. Oh, that is a surprise.
Yeah.
That is a surprise
And
because
so
98% of the time it flips. You got a whole new
absolutely.
crew you're running with. So
100%.
wow. How
Yeah.
how did that happen?
We just started to discover, man, there's some gold, on this staff that
Mm,
has been undiscovered. People in places and in positions that they should not be in, and they could
hmm.
thrive in this position. And this is actually what their calling and their gift setting is. And this is what we've discovered about them because we spend time with them. And that to us was a very beautiful journey with the staff. And as our staff got healthy, so did our church. And
That's
that,
true. Healthy at the top, healthy
man,
throughout.
I'm telling you. And so
Dysfunctional at the top, you're going to get dysfunctional throughout.
1000%. And
Yeah.
that's what we are seeing. We are seeing, them able to love and steward people well because they have been loved and stewarded well. And it's a very beautiful, beautiful season of ministry and leadership that we're in right now.
At the height of the conflict, which everybody in leadership would hope would be one day, but it sounded like it went on for about a year, maybe longer, maybe a bit shorter,
Oh
but it was
man,
not
it's still going on right now.
still going on right now. Okay.
Absolutely. Still
All
still
right.
got
Still going on.
lawsuits lingering. We have been very, very blessed that every defamation lawsuit has been thrown out of
Yeah.
court. And
Yeah.
it's been one of those things that has been heartbreaking that we have to navigate, heartbreaking that it has happened to our community. But at the same time, we will do our part as shepherds to make sure that the bride of Christ is stewarded well. And so, yeah, we're still navigating it, but we're coming out of it with victory in Jesus' name.
On your bad days, because we all have bad days,
Absolutely.
what goes on inside you
hmm
and how do you pull yourself back from the edge?
It's been a long time since I've been angry, and
Really?
I can't allow myself to go back to that place. Moments of frustration for sure. But on those frustrating days, what I have to do, I have to spend time in worship. I have to spend time in the Word. And then, quite frankly, I just need to spend time with my wife and my son. They're reminders to me that life is far greater than these difficulties and these moments of pain and these moments of frustration. And I am constantly reminded that they are my first ministry. And so the church is
Mm,
not my first ministry, they are my first ministry. And as long as I keep my hands clean, my heart pure, my spirit refreshed through the word of God, my soul revived through spending time with them, then that frustration is short lived for me. And it helps
yeah.
to
Wow.
refocus me and it helps to keep me grounded in the purpose and the plan of God.
What does that kind of controversy and division and opposition do to a congregation?
Oh, man.
What have you seen happen to the body of Christ?
Yeah, and I want to be very careful not to generalize it, but I know for us specifically, it broke a lot of people and it hurt a lot of people. A lot of
It's like
people
you see mom
lost.
and dad fighting, right?
Absolutely.
Or the parents and the kids fighting.
Yeah, and so it hurt a lot of people in our context,
Yeah.
and a lot of people left. A lot of people were leaving before we came as well from a number of different decisions that were made that were hurtful. And so when we got there, the church was already hemorrhaging. And so we found ourselves kind of being like captains on a ship that had multiple holes in it. We're just kind of trying to patch this up and hold this this leak.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we were pretty stretched out pretty early on, but we just had a resolve given to us by God that He was going to do the things that we could not. And we've just seen, and I know I keep kind of going back to this, but we've just seen the faithfulness
Yeah.
and the goodness of God in this regard with his bride. And one of the greatest things that we learned pretty early on in this conflict and in seasons of pain is that the church that we stored is not ours, it is God's. and he will do what he does with his bride. And our job is not to carry the weight of that. Our job is to distribute the weight back to him. And he told me something that changed my life. It changed the way that I lead. And it was a statement that said, you can either cast your cares or you can carry them, but you cannot do both. And so every time I feel a care, I try to cast it and not carry it. And it's a friendly reminder to me that I am not God. He is. And he will work through everything that needs to be worked through. And all I have to do is be obedient. And I'll see him and his hand at work in and through my life.
Pastor Carey, that'll preach. Wow. Do you question your calling to
Never,
your church?
never,
No, you don't.
never.
Why not?
Because I know what he told me. I know where he called us.
But you
And
didn't have this picture in your head when you answered the call.
yeah, and no, but that's what gave us the resolve to stay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even though I could not see, I know what he said. And what he said led me through what I could not see. And so, even now, I don't know how, this will, or when will it end, but I do know that he is going to work it out. And for us to stay the course and for us to continue to be faithful and diligent in what we are doing and what we're stewarding, because he gave us a word that we have to carry out. And so when we get a resolve like that and a word from God, regardless of what's happening around us, I just know what he's spoken to us and in us. And that's something that I cannot shake. So no, never question once.
Tim, I talk to a lot of leaders who are in your position, and circumstances and facts and stories are different, but basically they end up taking over from a longtime person, pastor, and they end up with a mop and a bucket.
Yeah.
And, the ship was sinking already a little bit. Things aren't exactly, the financial disclosure wasn't accurate. Attendance numbers were exaggerated. They're there now. They're young. And they're trying to rebuild momentum and trying to find a mission. What advice do you have for them? How do you rebuild momentum in a situation like that?
I would say slowly is the fastest way to get to where you think God is calling you to go. And, we didn't rush to make any changes. We still haven't rushed to make any changes. We've been very slow. And something I think that we don't hear enough of in leadership is the word Godspeed. And a lot of times we hear good practices, we hear great systems, great, operational ideas, but any of those things that are implemented outside of God's timing still won't work the way he intends for them to work. And so I think there's something supernatural about God's speed, moving at the speed of God through obedience, even if it means that you are moving at the pace of a snail. You're moving super slow. You're moving at a speed that's uncomfortably slow. I think that when we do that in obedience, we see God do something that only he can take the credit for. And that is the case with our church.
When you look at all the people who are showing up,
Mhm.
what are they telling you? Like, this is the church that's been in the news now for years.
Yeah.
And when you're in the headlines, it's never positive.
Yeah.
You might get that one press release that gets published on page 97 of something. It's like, church is growing, added a location, right? Otherwise, if you're on the front page, if you're headline dude, it's not good news.
For sure.
So you've got all this bad news and you got lots and lots of people coming to Christ. What are they telling you?
A number of different things, but one of the common themes that we get is when people walk through one of our locations, they say they feel loved and they feel valued. And so a leadership principle that I learned from my parents very early on is the word may bring people, but it's the love that keeps people. And so as long as we can continue to model the love of Jesus Christ and really meet, engage, and steward people where they are and lead them to be more in tune and deeper in love of Jesus Christ, I think that's the transformative secret sauce that we have an opportunity to see God do miracles through. And so it's not, the worship. It's not even my preaching or teaching. It is the love that people feel. And so I think for our leaders that are listening, if you want to grow a healthy church, then love people into health.
Mm. Hmm. Tim, this has been so helpful. And I just want to thank you for your transparency in the midst of all
Oh,
of it. It went in a lot of
absolutely.
surprising places. What is one question you wish somebody would ask you that nobody ever asks you?
That's a great question, Carey. I think one question that I wish someone would have asked me that no one has or typically doesn't ask um, is why do I lead the way that I lead?
Well, let's go there. Why do you lead the way that you lead?
I lead the way that I lead because I want to lead people so I was not led. And the reason I say that um, is because I never experienced the pastoring of my parents. They were great, great, great pastors, but they were my parents. And so they led us from mom and dad. They led us from that posture. And they were far greater parents than they were pastors, in my humble opinion. And then after my dad died, I really didn't have that pastor. And so
Why do you say that? They were better parents than pastors. What's
they
behind that?
they prioritized us over a church. They
Oh,
prioritized themselves, their relationship with each other over people. I never had to compete with members of our church, me or my siblings, because we knew within our heart of hearts that we were our parents' priority. And we got an opportunity to go on a journey with them as they pastored the church and as they stewarded people. It was never, we're going to pastor the church and we're going to parent you. It was just us. And we were on the journey with them. And so they were greater parents and they were pastors and they were phenomenal pastors.
hmm.
To give you kind of a bird's eye view into both of my parents, I never saw my father raise his voice. I never saw him do anything outside of steward his life from the utmost integrity and character. My mom was tough as nails, resilient, first African American female to be on global television, teaching and proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ. But they were even greater parents. I mean, just phenomenal parents.
That's
They
so
loved
beautiful
us.
to hear because usually you hear the opposite. Great
Yeah,
pastors, not so great at home.
and so they set the bar pretty high, for us. And after my dad transitioned, I just didn't have that male figure in my life that was a pastor and could pastor me. My grandfather, he was more like a father figure to me, but not my pastor. And so it wasn't until some years later that I met my pastor and the person that I talk to almost on a daily basis, that does an incredible job of both fathering me spiritually, and he's like a father to me physically. And so, for me, I wish someone would have asked that question, why do you lead the way that you lead? And it's
And that is
because
why.
there was a large gap um, in between my dad dying and when I met my pastor, that I just felt so alone and felt like I had to discover and figure things out kind of on my own from that male's perspective. And so,
And so you lead differently. How? Because of that gap and because of that experience.
yeah, very hands on.
Yeah.
Um, very shepherd like, so very close to
Mm.
the sheep. And one of our prayers for our church as it is growing, is that we would not just be figureheads that communicate the gospel, but live it out in community with the people of our church.
How do you
And
do
so,
that at scale? I mean, when you have 50 people, it's not that hard.
yeah.
When you got thousands, it's hard. How do you do that at scale?
Uh, uh, well, we don't isolate ourselves from them. And what I mean by that is, so every Sunday after each one of our services, we're in the lobby, we're at the
Mm.
altar. We are praying with people, we are talking to people. I have given my cell phone number out publicly to our church, the entire congregation. If you got a question, text me. I'll respond to you. And so I'll block off time every single week to respond to as many text messages as possible because I want people to know we don't just care about them coming to church. We want to bring the word of God to them. We want them to feel shepherded. We want them to know that we genuinely love them and not just what they can do for the church, but this is what the church and Jesus can do for you. And so, if Jesus, being God in the flesh, I mean, all powerful, the most magnetic leader in leadership history, walked with people, who am I to think that I'm above that? If he lived his life in community, why can't I? If he had the power to heal and I do not, if he had the power to resurrect Lazarus from the dead and I do not, if he had the power to open up blind eyes, open up deaf ears, and I do not, I come in his name, why can I model my leadership after him? And, there may be pastors that are listening to this right now that have large churches and they're like, I just simply can't do that. I would encourage those leaders to take the time to do it as often as you can. And it will not just change the church, it will change you. It will change the way that you lead. It would allow you to keep your finger on the pulse of humanity and stay connected to the sheep that you are shepherding.
Can you get to all of those texts when you block time off, or what do you do with those you can't respond to just because of volume?
Oh no, we get to all of them. Yeah,
you get to all of them. Okay,
every single last one of them, and we oftentimes are the last people in our church because we want to spend time praying for and walking with people. One of the things that I think we fail to realize, the messages are great. They're the word of God, but walking it out is even better. And so people will remember us praying with them in the lobby far more than they'll remember my last point that I made and less than this message.
True.
And so that to me is the greatest application.
Well, you and Bob Goff, you've got a real narrow category of people who give out their phone numbers to lots and lots of people.
But he's one of the people that I got that idea from. I was like, man, how does Bob respond to all of these people? He puts it in the back of every single one of his books, and he's sold millions.
He sold a couple of books, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So if he can do it, so can I.
Tim, that's amazing, man. You got a new book. It's called The Bumpy Road to Better.
Yes.
If you enjoyed this interview, leaders, you're going to enjoy the book. Some of what we talked about is in there. A lot we didn't touch on is in there. And it's a very honest, I appreciate your transparency so much. And Tim, I'm really delighted to have this conversation. Books available everywhere, right?
Everywhere. Yeah. Everywhere books are sold.
And if people want to connect with you, where can they find you on the internet?
Timberlake.tv. And you'll see my number at the top. And if you need anything, text me.
That's amazing. That's amazing, Tim. All right, man. Well, listen, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Carey. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to doing this again.
Yeah, me too. Me too.